one of the things I would kind of talk a little, obviously, about my business, where I've been, what I've done, but also I was wanting to walk through kind of 12 steps of being an entrepreneur, and maybe help spark some ideas in you guys on what maybe you could do in being an entrepreneur. Because really, I tell people this all the time, I think we're all entrepreneurs. All of us are responsible for our own plan that we're doing. And if you go and work for somebody, you're just as much of an entrepreneur as somebody who starts their own business. You've just decided that you only want one customer, that being your boss or the company that you're working for. And so, but you have to still attack it the same way. You still need to come up with plans. You still need to figure out how you're progressing, how you're making yourself more stable. So let me just give a little bit of a background. So I came here to BYU, and every time they tell me, like, the year that we sold Omniture and stuff like that, it seriously makes me feel like I'm getting so old. I had my 40th birthday this year, and I'm just like, time is flying by, because I was only, I don't know, like 22 years old when I was here at BYU and started the company with Josh James, who I always give credit to. Josh and I, we met here at BYU, and we were great partners, and still have a great relationship with each other. And, you know, we did, obviously, Omniture. It started off as us building websites for other people. And I'm going to walk through a lot of this as I talk through kind of these 12 steps, and we'll talk about what I did and then help think about some things for you guys. So I'll talk about that more as we move on. So just in that summary, you know, started this at BYU. We took it public in 2006 and then sold to Adobe in 2009. Time's flying by. But it was a great ride and a lot of fun. Both Josh and I are BYU dropouts. So they don't like it when I throw that in there. That was me at my computer when we first started. That was in our little studio apartment that my wife let me carve out a little tiny space. And then one thing I remember about this computer is I spent, I want to say it was like an extra $1,000 for 8 megs of RAM or something like that. And then you can see that was actually our first trade show that Josh and I went to. We had our little mycomputer.com banner. And then we had, that was us when we rang the bell at NASDAQ. So currently, I have a new software company that I've been doing since we sold to Adobe. And it's called ObservePoint. A very exciting company. Same thing like my previous company where it's a software as a service. So people subscribe to our software and they use it online. And what we do is we audit data collection technologies. So if you have, whether it's a system like Omniture Site Catalyst or ad tags on your website, any tags that are collecting data, we go through and we audit the website to make sure all the tags are on the pages, that they're collecting data that they should be doing. And we do that for, you know, huge brands online. And right now, that's a pretty small company. I only have 7 people that work for me there, so a lot less than the 1,000 plus that we had at Omniture. And then fun real estate, all the student housing and stuff that you guys live in. We actually run and manage a lot of apartment complexes. That one actually in the picture, that's a one called Nauvoo House in Rexburg, Idaho. If anybody's ever seen that one or been there, we own that. And a lot of this stuff I've gotten into because you'll find that as you go through life and you become successful, or if you sell something, you have to, every time you get money, you got to figure out, you know, how do I make money with my money? And one of the things I decided to do was a lot of real estate. We actually house over 10% of the campus of Rexburg. And then that's a model train, believe it or not, the pictures. So this was kind of a fun business that I was approached about and started with another gentleman, and it's a small company, but it's kind of fun. And actually, one of the main reasons I started this business is because I wanted to make something real Like, my whole life has just been creating virtual things that you really can't touch. I mean, you can touch with the keyboard and the mouse, but I just wanted to go through that process and understand how things are actually manufactured, and made. And this definitely requires a ton of manufacturing. A lot of human labor even goes into these. So let's just talk about a few things while we're kind of going through how can you become an entrepreneur. How many of you feel like you're an entrepreneur? Very many? Honestly, a lot more of you should feel that way, because really being an entrepreneur is about being personally responsible, kind of taking the bull by the horns and knowing that you control your future. And that applies whether or not you decide to start your own thing or whether or not you're working for somebody else. So, but if you want to do your own thing, the first thing you need is an idea. Of you, I guess, who said you were an entrepreneur, how many of you actually already have an idea and have thought about starting or started a business? So quite a few of you. You guys are probably a lot like me. I always had ideas. I always still have ideas. And I always had some business I was working on. It's just, I think, how a lot of us are programmed. We like to create. We like to do. And, but one thing I will say, as I've spoken to a lot of students over the years, I feel like so many people feel like they have to invent something that's never been created before. And that is not the case when you're an entrepreneur. You just have to be willing to do good work for people. You don't have to create anything new. You could go out and you could just, start a fence company. And as long as you do good work and you're reliable, you will have tons of business. And so being an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you have to invent the cure to cancer or do anything like that. You can just be a good entrepreneur in a small business. And for me, what my idea originally is I was just building websites for people. I just was a student, just trying to make a few extra bucks. This is back in 1995. So you can imagine back then there wasn't a lot of people who knew how to build a website. And I actually didn't either. I had just come home from my mission, and I actually heard about this internet thing, and I thought it sounded really cool. So what I did is I had a friend who was a member of the Internet Club. There was an Internet Club here on campus. It was really almost more like a Unix users group or something like that. And he was telling me about it, and I thought to myself, that sounds really interesting, because I'd heard about the internet while I was on my mission, but I came back and I said, I want to come and learn. So I went to their club meeting, and I was like, this is really cool. And I actually, that day, the day I showed up, I said, hey, I want to be a member of your club. And they said, awesome, you can join. I said, no, I want to be one of the officers of your club. That's the exact day I showed up. So they made me the secretary of the club, and then within like 6 months, I was the vice president of the club. But one of the things I did is I said, hey, I want to help other people understand about the internet. And so I said, hey, why don't we teach HTML classes to students on campus? And so we put around flyers. Well, here's the funny thing. I volunteered to teach classes. I knew nothing about HTML, never done it, knew nothing about it. But for me, I always learn a lot more if I force myself to just dive into something. So each week I would prepare my lessons, and I would teach students about HTML, and I want to say we even only lasted like 6 classes that we ended up doing, but it helped me get a basis, and then I just started becoming really busy doing some website design for other people. But that's really what, for me, then transformed into this idea of analytics, because we were building websites for people, and then we had clients who wanted to understand who was visiting their websites, what was going on, and it kind of spiraled from there. Because I would say most great ideas don't just come to you. You actually need some experience in a field a little bit to get familiar with things and then see where that opportunity really is. So I'm a big fan of just diving in, however you can, into whatever you think is interesting, and then building off of that, trying to figure out how you could make the world better of whatever industry that you're in. And then you really do need to make a plan, write things down. Now, I'm super creative. I don't really like to write. I think the best grade in English I ever received was like a C in my life, you know. I can make really beautiful presentations, but all the words will be misspelled. And, but I am a huge fan of just writing things down. And for me, I mainly do that very visually. Like when I came up with a plan for like the website or things like that, I just visually create it on paper. But you also still have to come up with a plan of, you know, how are you going to sell, and just helps guide you in what you're doing. And this is going to be a work in progress always. You're always going to be updating it. And this is even going to be your business plan that you really probably show people if you decide to try and raise money, which I have a lot of thoughts on that too, if we ever want to go into that. I'm overall a big fan of bootstrapping versus raising a lot of money, which is funny, I guess, coming from us where we did raise a lot of money, but we actually didn't even get any money from a VC till we were like 21 million a year in revenue when we had our first VC get involved. We had some angel investors before that. So, you know, you want to keep kind of retargeting this plan too, because you'll find that the road changes, you know. I think starting a business is kind of like driving down a foggy road where you can see out a little bit, but you can't ever see far enough. So you have to keep adjusting as you're going down. You know, I wrote down kind of some basics in the summary of what you should have in your plan. That's what somebody would expect if you were going to go show it to somebody to try and raise some money. You know, in our first business, we did a full-on business plan, you know, the big stack. I've never, at least for me, seen people really raise money that way anymore, especially in software and things like that. You know, people really invest in the team and they want to see a basic synopsis of the plan. And then they might ask you for some more details that you might have to go into, which I always have backup material, but I like try and keep it to like 10 pages of PowerPoint presentation is my plan, basically. And then this is the other thing that I see so many entrepreneurs, they're seriously waiting for an angel to tell them to start their business. You know, the timing's just not right. You know, we're gonna have a baby or whatever. Until I graduate, then I'll do it, you know. There's never a good time for anything in life, right? Nothing's ever convenient. It's gonna be really hard. So I'd actually say you guys are in the most perfect time you could possibly imagine for starting a business, because your worst case scenario is you go take a job somewhere, right? Where imagine if you're 30 years old, you have a mortgage payment, you have kids, you have all these other things, it can be really difficult to have to quit your job to try and start a business. So, but you need to ask yourself a few questions, and one is, if you're married, is your spouse supportive of you being an entrepreneur? Because typically being an entrepreneur means the buck stops with you, right? And I have a lot of friends that if they are not home at 5 o'clock, their spouse is very upset. And that does not, you know, bode well for the entrepreneur, because, you know, I normally would go to the office at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and come home at midnight 1, I'd say most days. One thing that Josh and I did that I really think was great was we never worked on weekends. I mean, we sometimes would have to catch an occasional flight to be at a meeting on a Monday morning, but for the most part, we wouldn't go to the office on weekends. We try and be with our family and really focus on our family on the weekends. But it can be hard. I know even if you talk with my wife, you know, it was a little hard on her, and I have one of the most supportive spouses that you could possibly imagine. But I know a little bit of her. She, you know, sometimes felt abandoned while I was doing the business so much. And I think overall she likes the result, but, you know, it doesn't mean it wasn't difficult during those times. Because sometimes, you know, to your spouse, it can even seem like you're having fun. You know, you tell them you have to go to a conference in Miami in January. To them, they're just, in their head, they're just picturing you sitting at a golf course golfing and playing it up the whole time while you're in Miami. The reality is you're sitting in a stupid conference room the entire time talking to people you don't even want to talk to, and it's horrible, you know. Actually, it almost even bugs you that they did it in a nice place, like they were teasing you, you know. So, so the next thing is getting the right people. And one thing I wanted to talk about with this is you have partners, obviously, that can you get some support? You probably won't be able to get much partner support until you have a lot going on in your company because they need to feel like it's going to be mutually beneficial to them. But then with your employees, it's really critical to try and hire smart, hire slow. It is so easy to just hire that first or second guy that you talk with because interviewing people sucks. It takes a lot of time, and nobody wants to do it, right? So I just hired a new CFO. I interviewed over 17 people to do that. I just hired a new VP of sales for my software company, and we probably interviewed this guy 7 times. Had his wife come out to dinner with us. You know, you're kind of picking family a little bit, right? And especially when you're small, you can't afford to make a bad choice. It's really hard to let people go. So try and be smart about it. But if you do hire them and they are wrong, let them go very fast. Fire quickly. It's better for them and it's better for you. And you need to remember that when somebody is just not a fit, they're just as happy as you are. They might be scared, and that's why they don't just go on, but you need to help them move on. So, you know, and especially when you're small, you need to make sure they can handle a startup. We've had an employee who, you know, quits soon after joining just because they really figured out that they just can't handle the pressures of being in a small company. I actually think there's, you know, it's unfortunate in a lot of big companies. I think there's a lot of people who kind of hide in a big company. They just go and they can do really mediocre work and they never get fired because it's just such a big company you can kind of hide. I don't like those people. I like people who want to feel valuable, you know, they don't have to use bargaining techniques to try and force you to give them a raise. You want to give them a raise because they're so amazing. And then also protect your equity. You'll find that when you're really small, everybody wants something. They are like, well, give me 25% of your company. It's like, you kidding me? Especially if you're paying, I mean, if you aren't paying people, then that's something different. But, you know, as long as you're paying people fair wages, you don't really and shouldn't give out equity to them. You should only be doing that if they're, you know, completely essential and they're putting something into the business. If they're making a fair wage, in my opinion, they then don't deserve equity. And then surround yourself with advisors, and you guys obviously have a lot of great advisors here with BYU and a lot of the mentors. I think there's even the database, don't they have, that they can access? I know I've had several students contact me, you know, seeing if they could just meet for a little bit.
It's getmentoring.com.
Getmentoring.com. So, and you know, if you can build up a little bit of a network. Now, one word of advice is just remember, everybody kind of has their own paradigm. So just because even a mentor says something doesn't mean it's right for you. That's why it's really critical to talk with a few different people, because they had probably a little bit different business, you know, different set of circumstances. But the more you can talk with a few people, then you can kind of hone in on what's the right plan for you and what works. I know Josh and I, we got a lot of great advice. We got some bad advice, and but by talking with a lot of people, we were able to try and find the best path for us. And then I love books. It's some of the fastest ways to get a great opinion on something is read a few books. I do hate the fact that every person who writes a book thinks they have to write 300 pages of repeating the same thing over and over again, especially in business books. You know, it's like, well, my publisher said I should be 300 pages long, so let me tell the exact same thing in every single chapter for, you know, the entire book. So if you can get some of the synopsises, or lots of times, honestly, I just kind of read the chapter titles, find the parts that I'm interested in, and try and breeze through a few things. But I also like to, depending on the topic, I'll find like 3 of the best books on a certain topic and read the 3. And, you know, because again, you have to get different points of view because everybody will live through their own paradigm. So this is really the most critical thing. Can you get to revenue fast? Because you are not going to raise money. I'm just going to already tell you, you're not going to raise money. It's like only 0.02% of the businesses that try to raise money even raise money. And 90% of all statistics are incorrect. That's all. I had to throw that in there for my 0.02. I'd actually just read that in an article, but I didn't validate that in any way. So if you can get to revenue, customers will finance your business for you, right? They're excited. They want whatever it is that you're selling. Lots of times, even if you say, hey, this is what I'm working on, they're like, wow, I really could use that. I'll pre-buy it, or things like that. Because revenue solves most problems in your business, right? You can have the greatest product in the world, but if you don't have revenue coming in, none of your employees are getting paid, and they all walk out the door, and your business is dead. But if you have revenue coming in, you can keep, I always say it gives you more times at bat, right? You can keep swinging that bat. And then also find out what people will pay for. We ran into this all the time at Omniture, where like customers were asking for features, and you're like, well, what would you be willing to pay for that? Like, nothing. You're like, well, how important is that really, that feature to you, if it has no value to you? Now, there are some things that people just expect. I get that, like, I'm sorry, I don't put that door handle on the car because that's an extra $50 or whatever. But I think balancing that and trying to understand what will people really pay for, especially in the earlier days when you have to pick a smaller feature set, like if you're launching a product, you need to make sure it's the most valuable features so that people will pay you for it and quickly get you to revenue and keep you in business. Because the customers really are the cheapest financing you could get. I mean, why, when you're really young, let's say you just have a business plan. You're going to go to some friend, and they'll be like, all right, well, I'll invest 20 grand in your company for half of it. Do you really want to do that? You need to try and use customers to do it. And I think that's what worked well for us. We were building websites, and then all that revenue that was coming in, that's how we were financing building all of our other products. I mean, we already had Super Stats, which was the name of the Omniture Site Catalyst product before. I always joke, Super Duper Stats. We had Super Stats, and we had that product launched, tons of customers before we had ever raised $1 from anybody. And that's because Josh and I were the financiers, right? We were, instead of taking out money in paychecks, we were paying our programmers to build product. And that's kind of where I was going at with this, is where you might have to do different things as stepping stones to get to your long-term goals. Your business plan might be, I'm going to build a fiber optic network across the entire world, providing 1 terabit of bandwidth to everybody. That's a lofty goal. It's going to cost you $1 trillion to implement. Maybe you should come up with some stepping stones that will eventually get you there. So, expenses can kill you. Serious. Everybody is always like, well, we're getting this office space because we're going to grow into it. It's like, get the cheapest office you can, get it on a monthly lease so you can bail if you need to. When you're small, you need to make sure you control expenses, because expenses will kill you. If all of a sudden some of your customers don't pay you, how are you going to handle that? So don't overbuild, don't sign long-term agreements, watch your debt. I mean, it's basic accounting. Just don't follow the federal government, right? They're on a different plan than you. They have a printing press, you don't. So let's see, I think, we're like halfway through. What was the first step? I think you said it first, right? Okay. Do you want $100, or do you want to go to a BYU basketball game on the front row with me?
I'll go to a BYU basketball game with you.
Okay. Now we'll move on. Okay, because I have like the best seats in the whole place. I'll say that. Yes, they're cool. They'll feed you, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so listen to your customers. This is a fascinating one to me, because customers can actually lead you astray sometimes too. You need to be attentive to where you're wanting to go. Sometimes if you're a really good provider to a business, and they have a lot of other crappy providers in other parts of their business, they'll start asking you to do other things that are not even related to your business, just because they know they can rely on you. So trying to figure out, okay, where are we going? The ideas that my customers are giving me, are they relevant to my business plan and where we're trying to take the company? And if you can hone that in and build like a great customer advisory board, you can get some amazing feedback from customers. But you have to also be able to manage that from the standpoint of, I found that most customers are not big thinkers. They would not have ever invented the iPad, right? They normally, how I think most people work with software at least, is they're like, I kind of wish this button was over here just a little bit. It's like these little tiny changes that they want, and that's how innovative they are. It's normally, you're going to have to be the one who comes up with the whole next new thing. But you will find a few customers that are also very innovative. So trying to find those guys, find the ones that can be part of your advisory board so they're really helping you build great things. And then translating what they really want. So I ran into this all the time where somebody would be like, hey, can I borrow your bicycle? This is obviously an analogy. Can I borrow your bicycle? And I'm like, borrow my bicycle? What do you want my bicycle for? And they're like, well, I need to go to Wyoming. And you're like, you're gonna ride my bike to Wyoming? And what they were really saying, and that's where I would say, no, why don't you borrow my car? It's gonna teach you there faster. And in the product, in the software world, they would always tell me how they thought they should solve something instead of what they really were wanting. And so you have to dig in deep with your customers and listen to them and try and figure out what they're trying to tell you, because they think they're helping you by, instead of just telling you what they really want, by suggesting how you would go about doing it. That happened to me nonstop. So really listen, try and figure out, oh, they're actually wanting to go, here, and this is the best way to get there instead of them riding the bike to Wyoming. Steve?
How do you incentivize your customers to participate in these advisory boards?
Yeah, so he asked, how do you incentivize customers to participate in advisory boards? There's a lot of different things that you can do. I've actually found that most of them just want to do it. The guys who are truly innovative and stuff, they love that you want to listen to them. And so they normally just want to be a part. And there's actually almost a pride issue that, hey, I'm a part of the advisory board. They really value, at least in the software world, they value what I think. Because then they normally get access to beta product and some other things. And so that's an incentive too, of them getting access to earlier product. If you were doing something else, like the fence company, maybe you're giving them a discount on something because they're willing to be your guinea pig on something. I know we've done that at ObservePoint even, where we've given a few customers a very serious discount on a newer thing we were trying out and stuff like that. But normally that's temporary. It's like, hey, during those months of beta, you aren't paying for this, or you're paying very little, and then you go back to normal pricing. But you can talk to your customers and figure out what they need. But I really find that most people just want to help you too. And then focusing on the right thing, like I was talking about before. Are they asking for something that's relevant to what you're trying to do? So protect your culture. This is a critical thing, because it is really easy to be lazy and let other people kind of start running your business and let them start bringing in the culture of their old businesses. But your culture is kind of who you are. It's how you show your company to the world, and you need to be careful to make sure people don't start thinking, oh, that company, they're a bunch of jerks, or I don't like working there because they're all mean. So you need to make sure you're protecting your culture, that it's a place that people want to be, that it's a place that customers want to do business with. We've all been in a restaurant before that had a really mean waiter or waitress, right? And that's the last person that you'd want working in your business. So you need to protect your culture. We had a no-jerk policy, and we literally once had let go one of our very best people because he was a total jerk. Yes. The policy was actually called something else, but I BYU'd it for no jerks.
Thank you. What's the hard word?
Okay, this is my favorite. All these companies that are in stealth mode, the stealth mode companies. It is so hard to get the word out about your company. You should be screaming about it. And don't worry about somebody's going to take your idea. Nobody's going to take your idea. It's I'm actually fairly anti-patent and all these things. I think it actually stifles innovation. But, just go out and do it. That's what makes a difference, You can be super successful by just getting out there and providing great service. Execution is the biggest problem in all businesses. It's not that somebody just outdid you on your idea, of you happened to tell the wrong guy and he just went and raised $1 billion and started it. Except for Facebook, right? So for the most part, you really just need to start shouting it from the rooftops, because how can people become customers? How can people support you? How can people really get you going if you don't tell everybody in the world about your idea and be so committed to it that you are also moving that fast? Most of the people that I talk with who don't want to talk about their ideas is because they're actually never going to do it. And that's why they don't want to talk about it, because they know they're kind of lazy and they aren't really working on the idea, so they don't want somebody else to start working on the idea because they haven't gotten around to it yet. I've had so many people come to me and want me to sign NDAs to share their amazing idea, and I've never once had somebody tell me something original. So I'm also amazed at how often, we'll have companies come and present to us, to get investments and stuff like that, and they'll tell us, oh, we don't have any competitors. And we all look at each other, all of us pull out our iPads, and we're like, oh, you mean these 7 right here that took me a whole 5 seconds to figure out? It's like people don't want to know. It's almost like they want to believe their idea is so original that they don't even go through the effort to actually validate that there's tons of competition already out there. I guarantee almost anything you can ever think of is already out there in one way, shape, or form. Now, you might perfect it, and I think that's a good argument, if you use that Facebook example, where there was already those types of sites, to try and socially network people, but they just did it better than other people. So I list a whole bunch of other just basic ideas that you can do. Be careful and treat your money very sacredly, whether it's your money or whether you raise it from somebody. So at ObservePoint, we don't really do trade shows because they're crazy expensive. You go spend 30 grand on a booth, and for us, we never feel like we get that value. But we still go to the trade shows, and we still have a guy there who can answer people's questions, and we'll sponsor the lanyards or something just to get our name out, but it's way less money. So trying to be a little bit more creative. And probably a lot of that is because we have no investors besides myself and my partner at ObservePoint, so we treat our money very sacredly. Where if we had raised $20 million, maybe we'd just be out spending it. I think that's also why I'm such a big fan of just kind of more bootstrapping, because I just feel like it forces you to think. It forces you to come up with the best solution, because you have to swing only once and hit the ball, right? And if you only get one swing, you're really focused on it. Where if you think to yourself, I got 20 swings to try and hit this ball, you tend to be a little bit more lazy on it. So communicate. Make sure you're meeting with your people. Make sure you're talking with your people. Don't let them start talking amongst themselves and poison the company. If they feel like you aren't open to them, if they feel like you aren't listening to them, they're just going to start talking amongst themselves and create chaos in your company. So answer your email. Make sure you set aside one-on-one time with each of the people. And that's hard. I struggle even with answering email, because I've gotten to a point where it's actually really hard, because I get so much and so many people asking me for stuff. I'm like, what? Why just because somebody sent me an email do I now owe it to them to even respond, to whatever they happen to be asking me? I really try to, but it can be hard sometimes. And then listen. How many people are good listeners? Good listeners? See, they didn't even hear me ask. It's hard sometimes, especially when you get really into your field, to feel like you know everything about it. So make sure you're listening to your employees. They're talking to customers all day long. They have great ideas. I'd even say maybe some of our very best ideas come from the employees who are interacting with customers all the time. And then listening to your gut. If you get a feeling about something, go with it. That's what I always do. Listening to your business partner if you have one. I would also recommend that don't when you're starting your business, don't get too many partners. It makes it really complicated. If you have 3 business partners, 4 business partners, a couple of them are going to leave, guaranteed, and it just creates chaos in your business. And then listen to your spouse if you're married, or listen to your family or other people who trusted advisors that are giving you advice. And then save. This is a hard one. So many people are always just spending every dollar they get. And it's also hard because honestly, the way the government sets everything up, they disincentivize you to try and save for your business. But make sure that you can make it through downtimes, because sometimes, you might lose a customer. And all of a sudden, if you haven't saved up a little bit during the good times, you can't make payroll. And you don't want to be in that situation. If you ever do raise money, you want to raise money when everything's great. When you're thinking to yourself, man, we don't really need money. Because then everybody will give you great valuations. If you need that money bad, you're just going to get hosed. So, and actually the reality is you probably won't even be able to raise it because they'll look at your business and think it's horrible. So, yeah.
On your point on listening and the communication, did you ever have a point, I feel like with a partnership, there can be a time when one wants to go this way, and maybe if you're getting a lot of success, they get a bigger head and it's like harder. Have you ever had that happen, and how do you tackle that to where you save that relationship and you get back to the core?
Well, I think it really would just depend on how important is the relationship. I mean, if somebody's wanting to go another way, they're probably going to go that other way. I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd need to know more specifics, like on a situation. But I think the main thing is to understand where you want to go as a business. And if they're wanting to take you somewhere you don't want to go, well, then one, you need to really think about it and say, okay, should I change, right? Should we now go down that path? Or say, you know what, we're going to phase out now over the next, 2 years to not be partners anymore. Obviously, you don't want to leave your customers in a lurch if they're relying on something. A good example, we've done business before with a partner who, it was basically that exact situation where they were wanting to go a certain way. We were actually wanting to focus on more enterprise type accounts, and what we ended up doing is we ended up basically selling them a license of our technology to be able to go their own way and focus on a different part of the business we didn't want to focus on anymore. So. Okay, question. Right, and that just got you a basketball ticket or $100, either one, whichever you want.
I'll take the basketball.
Okay.
So, when you were at Omniture, you really started to turn the corner. And I know you had a different idea when you started your business than, the one that really, made you really successful. But,
Yeah.
I mean, how much of your success was a great idea that few other people were doing, or how much of it was just pure execution, doing better than competitors?
Yeah. So the question he asked is just kind of how much of our success was dependent on a great idea versus great execution and other factors that went into that. I think the answer to that is complicated, right? But I will say this, that I think Josh and I just believe in changing the world. Like, we would do anything to make that idea keep working. Our investors thought we were dead like twice, and we just kept going. And the analogy, I'm the king of analogies. Josh actually makes fun of me because I use so many analogies. Is if you go up to bat and you just refuse to stop swinging, you're going to hit a home run. It's just going to happen at some point. And that's how I felt about us with our business. We just kept going and going, and like they kick us and throw us on the ground, we just get back up, and we just kept going and going. And I think there's a lot of people who won't do that, that just kind of, they get tired and now it wasn't as easy as I thought. I know so many people who start a business because they want it to be easy and they just want the get rich quick scheme. Starting your own business is harder than going and working for somebody else, and that's why the rewards are so much greater for somebody else. One word of advice that I would give all of you as you're looking at career versus doing your own thing is that, for the most part, there are exceptions to everything, is if you have somebody and he's sitting there and he's thinking about paying you $500,000 a year, all he can think about is who could I have do this for less? But if you're paying yourself $500,000 a year, all you're thinking about is how do I pay myself $1 million a year? right? And you're super happy to do it. And then you're thinking, how do I pay myself $2 million a year? And you're excited to give yourself raises, right? You're excited for those type of things. Where working for somebody else, it's just built into us to be efficient, to try and make good use of the funds that we have. So if there's somebody who's saying, oh, I want to make $150,000 a year, and you're then presented with 20 other people that you think could do the job just as well for $100,000 a year, you're going to pick that person to do it. So, that's the life you're going into when you're working for other people. Yes, right there.
Like you just mentioned, there's like 2 points you almost begged and not believe your idea is gonna work. Like we're taking a entrepreneurship class right now, and we came up with like 2 ideas at first, and we just feel like it's not gonna work, and so we jump on to the next idea.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you like so sure your initial idea will work?
You never are totally sure that it's going to work. Again, if you look at that, we started with building websites for people. We actually tried like 5 different businesses, and we had them all simultaneously going. And our Superstats application was one of those ideas, and it really started to take off. And once it started to take off, then we just kind of shut down the other ideas, at least for us, how we approached it. But then we were just doing small business or even just small website analytics. Superstats was basically a counter you could put on your website, and in exchange for an ad banner, we would give you stats. And we had actually 2 million people using our product. And and for us, we decided, we should have a paid version that doesn't require advertising. And then, we slowly manipulated our business to what it became, because then we were like, well, we don't even really like these little small business customers that only pay us $20 a month. So there was a point where I had a couple customers paying me like $10,000 a month for stats, and I had a whole bunch of people paying me like $20, and they required just as much help as the $10,000 guy. And so that's where we said, let's get rid of our small business stuff and let's focus on just the enterprise accounts. So you'll find your business just starts to mold as you discover your market. Let's go right there.
On your slide, when it said listen, you said listen to your wife.
Yeah. I was totally kidding about that. That's silly.
No. I listen to my wife about business all the time. I mean, can you give us maybe an example of an inspiration of how your wife helped you out?
Sure. I think even for me, with my wife, it was more just being attentive to her and her needs too, and just because I needed to make sure that she was overall fairly happy with how things were going, so she'd be very supportive of me and doing what I was doing. And I'd bounce some stuff off her. My wife was a music major, and I definitely would talk with her about a few things, but not a lot of business stuff because she's not necessarily super business savvy. But I definitely, just overall in life and what we were doing, we'd always be communicating and trying to make sure we're on the same page. Let's go over that back there.
How did you and your family overcome the jumpstart jitters?
Yeah, so I had one big advantage. My wife grew up so dirt poor, it's not even funny. Like the first time I ever went to my wife's house, they only have plywood floors in the house, of a house that her father built from his own hands. He's an incredible man. And so she, even to this date, my wife has spent a ton of money if her credit card bill comes in at like $1,500 on a month. And then mine's like $35,000 for the month. It made it easy because our first year of business, I only made $6,000, and we lived completely autonomously on $6,000. Luckily, I guess not completely, because my wife had a scholarship, so we didn't have to pay for her schooling. We had to pay for my schooling, but not her schooling. My wife's super smart. And I always call her my spell check. Since I'm the C guy, right? I was the C guy in spelling. And so, I think that just having, not the expectations of a lot of money, because we went 6,000, I think the next year was 18,000, and it just kind of kept growing from there. So we both were just, it's funny, I'd also come off my mission, so I had only lived in little dives of apartments, and I served in Brazil. And so we just weren't used to anything, and we didn't really have any fear. I don't know why. We never had any fear going into it. My dad was a salesperson, so I was used to kind of having to make your own way, and yeah, I don't know. I never even turned in a resume to anybody to get a job from BYU. And I was actually only one semester away from graduating. So, does that kind of answer your question? Or, yeah, right there.
So why not go back and finish your degree if you're only a semester away?
Yeah, I actually really love that you asked that question, because I think overall, I'm going to say it even though I shouldn't, education is a fraud from the standpoint of you are here to make a way in life. And I think everybody has the goals totally backwards. Like somehow the degree is the most important thing. The most important thing is being able to be self-sustaining and personally responsible in life. I mean, I'm not going to get a raise by going back and finishing. And so to me, it's actually a complete waste of time. Anything I could have learned, at least this is how I feel now, anything I could learn in a class for me, for what the types of things I want to learn, because I don't want to become an accountant or anything like that. The type of thing that there's so bleeding edge technology, I'm just going to go on the internet and I'm going to learn it in a day. So anyway, thank you for coming, and hopefully some people stay around for our more QA after this.